Hi, my name is Phil Hagan, and I'm a principal information security researcher at Canary. Today, I'm really excited to talk to you about one of the techniques that's going to be highlighted in our 2025 threat detection report. And the one I'm going to be talking to you about today is email hiding rules. Email hiding rules is a technique defined by the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which details how an adversary might conceal email messages inside a mailbox that they already control. Of course, we're always looking at what seems to be an overflowing inbox, and there's lots of folders or directories within that inbox, some of which you might not even notice, some of which might look like RSS feeds. That's a default that's available in a lot of Microsoft Exchange hosted environments. Or it might be something that just looks kind of backgroundy, kind of something like phishing messages or junk mail. These are places we don't typically look. And when an attacker employs email hiding rules, they take messages that are delivered to that victim's inbox and they'll hide them in one of those other locations, hoping that it isn't discovered. This is often done when the attacker is using that victim's account as a jumping off point to access other services, where there might be password reset messages or other information that's valuable for the attacker's objectives. But if the victim actually saw them show up in the inbox, it might give them a bit of a hint that something strange is going on that might need to be investigated. I think my number one takeaway for email hiding rules showing up in this year's threat detection report is that we need to look at built-in functionality that can provide a benefit to the attacker. With something like email hiding rules, it's a built-in function that every email service out there is going to make available to the users. It doesn't require any new malicious software, so the fingerprints end up being very difficult to follow sometimes. So instead, we need to make sure that we're observing any kind of logging artifacts or any other kind of forensic artifacts that are going to tell us that these built-in functionalities are being used. And then we have to take that extra step, which is often the more complicated step, which is trying to differentiate benign from malicious use of that built-in functionality. This is the first year that email hiding rules is showing up in our threat detection report. It's very similarly related to email forwarding rules, where an attacker might take advantage of the automatic forwarding functionality that's available in most email providers and send that message elsewhere. But of course, the big difference with email hiding rules is that we're now looking at that being a technique that doesn't require sending the message out of the victim's environment. It keeps it right there in their own mail account so that the attacker can come back and look at that a little bit later. For me personally, what was most surprising about this technique being observed so often in our data set for the calendar year 2024, which is why it's in the 2025 report, is that the attackers are assuming they're going to maintain access to that victim's email box. They're not setting it up once and hoping that it continues to work. They're setting it up and they're coming back and they're looking in that folder as time goes on. So it certainly does suggest that attackers using this technique expect to enjoy a little bit more of a dwell time or a point of presence on that victim's account or system so that they can reap the benefits of this. And it's a little bit different than we've seen in the past, especially when we compare that to email forwarding rules, where the attacker expects they're going to lose access to the victim's inbox or environment, so they want to make sure that that message is forwarded off. Again, with email hiding, they're expecting that they're going to maintain that access for the long duration, potentially the entire duration of the campaign, or maybe even beyond that. I think the biggest actionable insights that I took away from seeing this technique show up in our new report is that we really need to ramp up the type of logging that we're making use of. There's a variety of different logging artifacts that might be available depending on what your email service provider makes available. But these are things we need to incorporate into our collection and therefore our threat detection techniques. So if you're not looking at your very low level email service logs, that might be an area that you'd like to focus on in order to catch the email hiding and email forwarding rules, because those artifacts become extremely valuable, especially when it comes to looking at those for email hiding rules. This is going to also create, as I said, a lot of noise in that any kind of legitimate user filtering and foldering is going to be caught up in this as well. So we want to try to have an idea of, okay, what are the ones that are different, or the ones that might have certain keywords that look suspicious or look like they don't want to attract attention. So those are things that we'd want to try to look at. And then, of course, we're going to want to follow up with the individual user sometimes to say, is this actually a folder that you've created in your inbox that's something that we need to rule out? So there's a bit of a maintenance end to it as well. And as with a lot of these built-in capabilities, it's going to be one of the bigger challenges to appropriately and fully discover and detect this behavior to rule out the good from the bad. It certainly ends up being a challenge. But as we see our adversaries take on more and more of these sneakier, these harder to uniquely identify behaviors, it's going to become really important if we want to spot that kind of adversarial activity.